open the website.
Started.
And I'm going to open up. Yeah, it's no problem. And see how many listeners we actually have live. Well, right now there's 4 waiting. And I'm going to connect us now. So I'll tell you what, Bill, if you want here in, I don't know, 10 seconds, you can do an intro if you want.
Sure.
So.
Welcome everybody to the working that is Krononaut Chronicles. My name is Bill. I am the host of the show. I don't think I've ever said that before in an intro, so kind of wanted to make it a point to say that this time. But I am joined tonight by 3 of the prime Chrononauts so far, and we'll hear from them in just a second. But before that, I did want to look at the almanac real quickly. It looks like we do have a new moon coming up on Thursday, and it also looks like there's an eclipse that day too. So maybe something to look out for. And another just a fun little tidbit that is in here that I found interesting was that the death of the oldest known spider was announced in 2018. The anniversary of that was this Wednesday. So that's coming up this week as well. The spider was 43 years old. It was a trapdoor of the trapdoor species. So death does kind of tie into the topic that I kind of had picked out to end the show with, which is kind of weird because you don't think that the inspirational segment of the show would have to talk about death, but here we go. But before we get into all of that, I did want to thank Derek for hosting the show and sponsoring the show through mysticalwares.com. So, Derek, well, I guess we'll start with you. Thanks for being here. What's going on? What are you grateful for?
I appreciate that. I'm well, I'll start with grateful. I'm grateful for what we call synchronicities, and or those breadcrumbs in life because of how I'm paying more attention and following those. They're leading to bigger and better things and a lot more fun. And we can get into some of that when I'm getting at specifically later, maybe. But just the synchronicities that are out there from ourselves for ourselves, to realize and pick up on. And then I kind of like to make the poor joke of you find enough of those breadcrumbs, you have a loaf of bread, and then you can figure out what to do with that loaf of bread because there's always more. But yeah, so I've been paying attention to those and I appreciate them and I'm grateful for them. And that's what I actually led to this podcast too with me and you and Ben, Adam, and Owen. So no, it's been great.
Yeah, for sure. Synchronicities are super fun to keep track of. This podcast is a synchronicity. Me meeting Ben and Adam and you, Derek, it's all one synchronistic pie. Speaking of Ben and Adam, either one of you two want to share anything that perhaps you are grateful for this evening, and then we can go from there. Adam.
Sure. I'm absolutely grateful for the weather, water, rain. It has been pouring down here for the last week. Some places getting like 20 or 24 inches within an hour of raindrops. So it's been incredibly dry. Everything's dying. Everybody's lawn is dead. You can see it in all of the species. And yeah, it's just exciting to see all that life that is going to spring back up from this inclement weather. So I love it.
So I'm glad that you avoided all of the craziness with the I guess there's some flooding down south of where you are, right?
Yeah, a little further south. There's localized flooding, but yeah, not as bad as Fort Lauderdale got.
Do you have like any scalar antenna device around your house or whatever? Because I don't know. Whenever I hear bad news weather about Florida, I'm like, oh fuck, Adam's gonna, right? But you're always fine, which I'm grateful for. But like, I don't know. Is that you're just in a good area? I don't even know exactly where you're located, to be honest.
Um,
Because we've never met
well,
before. Like, I
what
don't
what do
know.
you mean by like being in a good area? You mean just like, for the way that weather works around it?
Yeah, like you're on the the ocean side, right? Not the Gulf
Yeah,
side.
I'm on the ocean side, and like most places, when you actually start paying attention to the weather, people start defining it as, east or west of this road. And there are certainly some geologic divides here locally where I'm at, pretty much within like 3 miles, where you just tend to get more storm development and rain. And it kind of breaks right over the lake, and then opens back over the water. And then there's this section of about where I'm living at. I'd probably say, a 5 to 6 mile stretch of where um, maybe not even 5 to 6, let's probably say 3 to 4 mile of where the weather is just inclemently weird, meaning it seems that the storms, the clouds kind of go around during certain parts of the season.
Interesting.
So I don't know. I've always thought that I live in a geologically unique perspective because I live here in Lantana, and it's always kind of been just the town that was that way. The weather was always just a little bit different here than it was in Boynton Beach, than it was in Palm Beach, than it was in West Palm.
Yeah, I feel like the West Michigan area is kind of like a little weather pocket too. But I guess I asked about the scalar antenna thing because I was reading a lot. Was doing a little bit of looking up on the topic of electroculture, which is
Hmm.
basically just sticking copper rods in the ground, which I think Ben told me about. Uh, Ben, do you remember mentioning that to me like a few weeks ago, or am I just misremembering? And by the way,
Yeah, I brought that up. We were talking about scalar and Oregon energy, and I'd just been reading about it that day, actually. So yeah.
I've got these uh 12-foot 4x4 posts that I bought like 2 years ago. I have no idea what I'm going to do with. I was going to build a fence for a garden, but that kind of didn't work out. So now I'm just thinking about turning them into huge, huge electroculture antennas and putting them in the ground. Wrap some copper wire around them. But that's maybe for a different topic time. But Ben, how are you? And what are you grateful for, if anything? Hopefully.
Doing great. And yeah, um, today I am grateful for my body and range of movement. Started the new gig, and it's as physically demanding as I was anticipating, and my body is stepping up and making it seem easy. So
Awesome. So you're wading through the water then too a little bit because you're setting deck like
nope,
dock boats. No?
nope. Uh there was ice on this lake less than a week ago. And for all the benefits of cold exposure and therapy, I am not a fan. So if that was part of it, I'd probably be finding something to do right now. No, we have a barge. The crew I work on has a couple of barges, and so everybody is on a fairly stable work platform, as stable as you can be on a boat, I suppose.
Awesome. So you got to find your sea legs then.
Yeah, yeah.
You ever get motion sickness from being? Have you been on the other side?
Not really. Um, Small planes, the bush planes up in Alaska would, but that was really up to the pilot too. So
Ah.
I'm pretty good with travel and motion.
I remember getting a little bit queasy on I think it was some kind of tow boat. Believe it or not, I was on the way out to Catalina Island, not the Catalina Island off of California, but there's actually one off of the Dominican Republic. And I was down there during a field school, a field class on archaeology during college, and we were going out to this island because the dive team from the university I went to was going to recover a cannon from one of Captain Kidd's pirate ships that had sunken there. So we were boated out to this little island on what the towboat that they used to drag this cannon back in. And that is the time I remember getting a little bit queasy because it wasn't built for passengers. We were just sitting on the edge of this little tiny boat with like two gigantic motors on the back. So that's my story about motion sickness. But speaking of synchronicities, Adam and I we have a synchronistic past in that I actually met his co-host of his other podcast called Cat in the Box at CryptidCon back in 2019. And we were there was a conference obviously about Bigfoot and the such, and a bunch of us from another podcast called Cruising with Steak had rented some hotel rooms, a block of hotel rooms, and I got to room with Justin, who is Adam's co-host, and I didn't know Adam at the time. So come to find out they're doing 13 questions that I actually got to meet Justin before Adam, which was kind of unique, synchronistic in a while.
Yeah, it's the world is a lot smaller than it would seem. People tend to find those genuine connections when statistically it just should not happen. So those little synchro moments.
Well, and with hermetics, right, the law of attraction, your frequencies were attracting to each other long before you got together and knew about each other even. And so those connections between Adam and his co-host and you working in to the picture, you were just kind of honing in on the frequency you were looking for.
So in, I guess in the play of life, and if when given that we may have multiple, or we do have multiple incarnations, right? And how many of these new people do we really meet? Because I've heard of like these soul contracts and galactic families that it's the same person playing a different role in each life. Like, do we really ever meet anybody new? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I said, that's an interesting question. It all depends on your perspective. I mean, ultimately, you can say we're all one, of course. But if you come out to, I don't know, the soul or spirit perspective, I mean, you're meeting your other selves. It is another way of putting it too. It all depends, it's a play of words, of course, and depends who I'm talking to and how I get into it and describe it, what their understanding is, because you got to keep it digestible and understandable. But I've seen in this lifetime, I've met, and I lived in Europe 4 years. I was in the U.S. military there for some time, and I'm bringing that up because, and I don't even know how many countries I went through and toured and did different things in, and in a couple of them, 3 times, I saw the same, and I didn't know these people. They were just tourists, to put a title on them. Didn't know, but very identifiable enough to where I recognized them, and they recognized me in different countries, months apart. It wasn't some tourist thing where we're on, you take the bus from A to B. Again, I was in the military, so I did things, air quotes here, randomly and synchronistically. These people lined up, and what it all played out to be, it wasn't that they had some magic word to tell me or something to do for me. It was for me and or them to have that realization or aha moment at the time that is a thing, and I'm sure there's a better word than a thing for it. But that does happen, and I had multiple of those occurrences or synchronicities, or again, aha moments, I like to call them in life, that made this to where it wasn't, the odds are this. No, it was straight up impossible odds to happen. It's happened many times. And we all have these things happen to us. Now it's whether we pick up on them or not in this life, because often, we're going 100 miles an hour, much like I do. So, but yeah, so I've seen things like that where, and then that actually tying back into what you were talking about, Bill, is those were entities coming in from another life, because now from the now perspective, I can actually read more into that situation or occurrence, like literally right this moment I can as well, and look off and see, and then I can connect to those people, and both my ears just started ringing. That happens on cue. And then there's more, and I can get more, I like to joke and say more to the story and see that, oh, you were so-and-so in another, not past life, it's concurrent life, because they're all happening. So anyway, I don't want to unwind that too much, but yeah, that probably already didn't I?
No, I love that we got onto this topic because it actually kind of leads into the new business segment. And to get to start with that, the new business segment, I guess I'll go first because I didn't share a gratitude, and so I'm kind of cheating because I'm using this for both. But my so I guess my contribution here is that I assembled a and Ben saw pictures of this. I assembled a buckwheat mattress over the weekend. It's made of 205 pounds of buckwheat hulls stuffed in little pods that are woven together, and you lay on it. It's kind of like this is only day number 2 for me, or this will be night number 2, so there's still an adjustment period, right? But kind of like sleeping on the ground a little bit, but way more comfortable. Supposedly it's supposed to help people with back issues, and which I am of those one of those people. So hopefully it works, and I will report back as it comes along. But speaking of new business and I guess uh, concurrent lives and dead people, Derek shared with me a very exciting new venture that I believe you're able to talk about it now. I guess I brought it up. I should have asked beforehand, but you did mention that you have a tour now, right?
Yeah, no, it's we can talk about it because actually the tickets went on sale a couple hours ago. So now my polished rock and crystal jewelry and gifts and all kinds of goodies store up in Mount Vernon, Washington, has a new add-on to the business called Mystical Wares Haunted Tours. And our first one, so we recently, just a couple days ago, purchased our own bus. And I'm going to deck that whole thing out and get it wrapped and things like that. But it's ready to go now already. And we can take 19 people at a time, but we're going to go to, and there's going to be multiple tours, even a Sasquatch Bigfoot one. But the first one is the Northern State Hospital. It used to be called Northern State Mental Institution or for the mentally insane. There's lots of spins on the name, but the locals and its actual name is Northern State Hospital that shut down in the 70s. And I won't get into a whole description here, but basically a lot of horrific stuff happened there, just like any of those places we've probably all heard stories of happened. And this one kind of exceptionally even ties into some MK Ultra stories and whatnot. And I have some stories of that in the background, maybe for another podcast. So we're going to take a tour bus of people there, a couple times a month and get out, tour the buildings. You're going to get to go up and look inside through, depending on where we're at. Sometimes it's a window you get to look in because it's so dilapidated and just straight up haunted house looking or haunted hospital looking. Not just looking, that you get to experience all that and walk around, and we'll give you a background. And then me, I'll just kind of throw the terms out that most people know, being a psychic medium or energy worker, I'll be there giving the tour as well, giving my metaphysical input. And I've been there several times, and I'll just say those that hang out there are very willing to chit chat. So that happens, and then we move on to a 5-minute drive away on the bus again to the farm. And here's why I want to bring that up, because that's fun, and fun from the metaphysical perspective, because that's where you get to enter, I don't know, a dozen or so buildings. And by the way, everyone, all of this, images, videos, description of the tour, all of it is at mysticalwares.com website right now, and you can just click the link haunted tours, or there's a little image I put together there today up there as well, where you can read more about it, because I'm going so quickly. But when we get to the farm where there's those buildings you can actually walk into, and we're going to break out, think of every ghost or spirit hunting device you've ever seen on any Ghostbusters show or thing. We've got them all. We threw some money at it to have fun, from FLIR devices to night vision to, again, ghost boxes, spirit boxes. And by the way, I have no problem getting those little guys to turn on and chime in. So we're going to break out the woo-woo trinkets I like to make fun of as well while we're up there in the farm. And then again, everybody gets to walk around and explore and ask questions, and we'll just kind of, each tour is going to be unique, of course. So yeah, that's happening here. We're going to have them in conjunction with our metaphysical / psychic fairs that we have in store loosely every other week. So basically on that Saturday, you can show up for the fair, check it out, and jump on the tour bus and it's a 4-hour tour. We provide a light snacks, lunch sort of deal with it. And yeah, so it's gonna be a lot of fun.
That does sound like fun. I am curious though, like, is it ever possible to unhaunt a place like that? Like, because I know you can clear energies and stuff. Like, Does that happen eventually?
Yeah, that's funny. My right ear, and I always like to give this some of the behind the scenes chit chat with someone like me. And I may be the only one that finds it interesting, but who knows? And so my right ear, just think high def metaphysical ear, so not just the typical stuff I pick up on, which would be the stuff around me. This is like really getting my attention. I'm just kind of differentiating for a reason. I really hope I'm just not boring everybody. But when you said that, that's what happens. So that's kind of, again, that behind the scenes part. And I'll tell you, and so basically telling me, so the behind the scenes info was, tread lightly, watch what you say, and you'll see why I'm saying that. I don't, when we go on this, in fact, on our tour page, I just put a little notice on the bottom saying, a little warning, if you feel something, let me know. I'm not gonna go through the whole spiel right now, but it is on the website. And I do an arm, people often call it protection. I like the word armor, a protection armoring process for everyone, including the bus and all of our items with us, because that's a thing too, of course. Think psychometry. They hold energies. So yeah, you can, but that's not something I do. I'm not someone who I'm an aware energy worker that doesn't walk in choosing. So I'll use this analogy. I like country music. I'm an older guy, not rap, let's say, and I'm not judging rap. I'm just, before my time. So it's just a thing. So I need an analogy here. So I'm not going to walk in an environment and blast my country music or my this energy or that energy, or you're a dark entity. Who am I to say what's spicy or a good music? I'm not. So I go in there, give everybody, again, I have to work with an analogy, love frequency, and that is a science thing, 0.1 hertz. Earmuffs, we can call it, to run with this cheesy analogy. And I don't go in there just ghost busting, blasting the place out. Now, let's say I do on the inverse, an entity pops in, and it happened the other day, starts chit chatting with me saying, hey, and I'm going to make fun of this because, it's not a concrete way of describing it. I'm aware. And if he starts talking to me directly, like conscious, well, then it's not just some cycled energy that's repeating or something like that. I'm not going to expand on all that. And he asked me for assistance, well, then I'll do it. But again, I don't turn in there, so then I'll turn on the country music for him, to keep with the analogy, because he's tired of the rap, so wants out. But no, I don't go in there and just start blasting things. I'm well too aware of that. But also, I am so aware, and again, I'll just use the term a seer. If something sticks to somebody somewhere, I'm going to take care of that as well. And if it's a negative something from, most perspectives, I'll deal with that as well. So I'll just say, I go into that environment not lightly and very well equipped for the environment. But yeah, not pushing my country music by any means, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I was going to ask a question about the differences of ghosts, and I think that you kind of alluded to it in that there's what type of energy that just kind of recycles itself or is stuck in a loop. Is that, would you classify that as some or is that even a person at that point that needs help crossing over, or is it just residual, like
Yeah, you picked up on that when I was doing. I usually try and do that, throw some in there. It's somebody just stuck in a train of thought is a better way of us wrapping our heads around it. So it's not that they're forced to do this, that, and the other. It's just like any of us in any moment of time. I'll just say, here these guys, I won't get into any specifics. The last couple of days, I have been stuck in a kind of a negative train of thought, just experiences I've been going through, and I'm having to catch myself and slap myself out of it. Go, nope, got to get back positive. And luckily, those around me are helping. But it's like that. It's like being stuck or believing you're stuck. And then, yes, then you can start thinking a cycling of energies and a repeating thing. But I have yet, and we'll call that a ghost just for ease of conversation. So I have yet, and I met a whole lot of them, more than probably physical people, entities, ghosts, play of words, depending on their awareness. I have yet to meet one or perceive one that is stuck, that can't be helped out of that if they want to. So that's a little add-on. Again, I always do for those that are kind of reading between the lines of what I'm saying. Whereas spirits are more, again, it's always my play of words. We each have our own description. But a conscious entity, just disincarnate, just not walking around in their meat sack we call a body anymore. No, they'll chit-chat. They're the ones that jump in. And when I do the whole medium thing, sometimes it's called, and I just chit chat with them. You know, I call them more so spirit guides at that point, because they look at me, they do all kinds of things. They're not stuck in some cycle. So that's a little differentiation from my perspective on them.
Okay. So the ones that need help crossing over, are they unable to do it themselves, and this is why they need the assistance of a living person? Is it like is our
No, they are able. They're always able to do it themselves. It's just whether they have to become aware of that is all. And nobody needs help. Again, it's just like nobody needs healing. Nobody needs a doctor. We can all do it ourselves. It just depends on our awareness level at the time. How much we can wrap our heads around it. Okay, they call it a miracle. They call it a placebo effect. Whatever. It's energy work. We can all do it. And then again, we can all describe it different ways. But that's all it really is. So nobody ever needs help. There's never somebody stuck. I mean, there's somebody just like us. So I'll just say it was a bad mood I was in. Yeah, I was stuck, air quotes here, in a bad mood, but chill, and talking to myself, chill out, tone it down, hero. It's not so bad. A whole lot of people have other heavier dramas on them. And if I can start getting that mindset. So same thing with the ghost or whatnot. They don't have to sit in that. But they also often don't know that they don't have to. So, that's kind of what is that? Catch-22? I don't know.
their awareness? Yeah, they're just not aware. I've been picking. It's something I picked up on because I'm going to talk about awareness in the third segment. But because it's all this kind of sounds like purgatory. Like I grew up Catholic, so I'm thinking that maybe the dead in if I remember correctly, this is part of the economy of salvation, what they call it, economy of salvation. There's dead people in purgatory that they're not in hell, but they're not in heaven. So they need help getting to heaven. They'll get there eventually. So
Oh, yeah, that's one of
apparently,
those tricks that are out there.
yeah,
Well,
apparently,
and Bill, when I've done the psychopomp work or helping a spirit who is stuck is not probably the best word. I differentiate and we'll call them a wayward spirit. And I find that it is a piece of their soul essence. It's not the full soul that is on this side. It is much like we've experienced a trauma that we carry around, right? And it can weigh us down. It can be as something like that, where a chunk of their soul essence experienced, ejected from the full aura and never got reattached, and it's still playing out that scenario like Derek was saying, and doesn't know it's lost and doesn't know that it's not attached, right? So helping those find their way is how I've looked at it, and it is a quick conversation. Hey, you're dead. And the rest of you is waiting, on the other side of that bridge. So it's that's the easiest way for me to explain it, especially when it's a piece of, part of another reading where that piece of a soul essence of an ancestor of someone is hanging around them, and they are, because of that familiarity of energy. And to explain it to the physical, that it is not, it's not all a grandma that's stuck here. It's just a little chunk, and it's a energetic echo that needs to reverberate away.
interesting. So that would be like the part that's stuck here is the part that's on repeat with the trauma,
right,
or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not the full essence of the soul. It's just a little piece that got lost.
So it doesn't. That sounds like it would happen very, very often. Like how, I don't know if there's a way to answer this. Like how often do we pass away and not have some type of, or I guess, is that the goal, to not have any unresolved issues by the time that occurs at your time of death? Like, is that how we level up, or something?
Good luck on that one. Having
Yeah, that's
unresolved issues when we pass. No, that's not. Plus, there's no, I don't know what passing is. You're just stepping out of your vehicle anyway. You don't
right.
really go anywhere. Yeah. And
But I
yeah, go
do
ahead.
think the Western, in our Western culture, we have lost that aspect of, call it the shamanic tradition of tribes or whatever it was. But there was someone um in the community who was specifically tasked to deal with death in a doula capacity, right? It was talking that person into the transition, and it's not just the clergy that was responsible for that, but it seems like it sort of moved in that direction and became less of a community event. And I think um being at peace before you transition is a big part of that, and I think our culture has lost a big piece of that.
Yeah, death was definitely dealt differently in the not so distant past than we do with it today. But I love that you brought that up because that is one of the things. So we ended the last episode for those of us, for anybody that is just now joining. We ended the last episode with a little reading from Miguel. I'm sorry, Don Miguel Ruiz from the Four Agreements. So this week's inspirational third segment is going to come from the second to last chapter on of that book entitled the Toltec Path to Freedom. And at the very end of it, he addresses the angel of death and the initiation, something that he calls the initiation of the dead. And this is something that we can use to teach us how to live in the moment, right? But more on that later. I love how these topics are being brought up synchronistically based off of what I kind of had a little bit prepared beforehand.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting with what Derek was talking about earlier too, with that particular building having a lot of energetic memory walking around and interacting with those who can perceive it. Art, the way I've thought about this a lot, and I've heard other people talk on it too. But the way we handle death in the West is very unnatural. And I think that is partly why we do experience as many ghosts as we do. We don't actually let them go, right? Everybody's hanging on to all of these memories and these energetic echoes. And so they can build up and and you can get extra ghosts running around. The more, I don't know, hands off and afraid we are of death, I think we sort of build it up into this thing that becomes something else of its own.
Yeah, it's definitely like its own egregore, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. But it is kind of like death. The closer that you look at it, the more, hopefully, the more that you see that it's not actual death, right? It is just a crossing over, like you said, and
Yeah.
start to something different. And that is kind of like, so I don't want to say that the closer you look at evil, it doesn't exist, because that statement is a big, broad, huge statement that is, takes a while to break down. But fear, that is a new, I guess that's something that popped into my head this week, was that fear is an irrational response to anything, basically. So unless you're getting attacked by a tiger, then yeah, maybe but it's natural, but when it logically, it's illogical. Maybe that's what I should put it as, to be afraid of anything, because that feeds our those negative emotions, and it doesn't allow us to operate within the love state. So love is the opposite of fear. So being being uh being aware of that, and it just struck me in a unique way. I guess you could say I was meditating on it, and that realization kind of popped into my head. Any thoughts on that? Fear being illogical?
I don't know about, I don't know if I'm probably often illogical on a daily basis. But no, actually, I think I see more as going with the flow. And the more we do that, the more you'll kind of, catch the current or stream or the wave, call it whatever you want. I think if any one of us kind of looks past or tries to do our best to get past the whole worried about being illogical or following some structured belief system, because I tried that, and I'm talking about religious. I'm talking about belief system in anything, the way anything works or responds, or if there's some limit to the metaphysical. For example, like, well, that person, and I'm going to make fun of it, is psychic level 5, but I'm not. BS. That's not a thing anyway. Psychic level 5, whatever I'm talking about, and everybody is everything. It's just always a realization sort of deal. So, if we can stop ourselves from getting stuck in those limitations and get out of our own way, and that's how I do it myself. This reality expands more and more.
Yeah, the belief system is something else that he addresses in that chapter, is that that's something that we're kind of handed down from our parents, and it's generational, and it's not anybody's fault that we kind of we lost our innocence and got domesticated with this belief system that we grow up and learn, right? We're not born with it, right? We learn it, and it comes with a judge and a victim. The victim mentality is what we learn we get addicted to, right? So that's something else that Don Miguel addresses. But not to skip around, but I am going to. Derek, back to the haunted mansion tour thing. Are you going to use any UV flashlights during the tour?
No, that is one of the things I'm doing. We have several UV or for those that know them as black light ones, because there's different wavelengths, and ones that will respond. I've even got green laser grids and other type of devices. Actually, it's called an experimental energy device. So yes, we'll be perceiving and or viewing or listening to lots of frequencies, and some are on this density or dimension, and some are on other ones. So yeah, the UV will pick up on a lot of stuff, and sometimes not such good stuff if you don't talk about physically what you'll see in there. But yeah, we'll look around with the flashlights and see what there is to see there. We've used them in Mystical Ware's store itself. At nighttime, especially, they work well because they also work good on a lot of the rocks and minerals that will fluoresce under black light.
Yeah.
I always take my black light flashlight with me to the gem stores.
I recently purchased one
great idea
for my wife to use. We have a rock and gem collection ourselves, but we don't have anything to fluoresce with. So I brought.
Take it outside too. You'll find that like possums or rats will actually fluoresce like a pink color. So you'll see them off in the distance running on things. So even in nature outside, you'll see certain insects or even certain parts of the environment will surprise you every once in a while.
We haven't yet to do that. I'll probably do that after we get off the call here. But how about, okay, you mentioned night vision goggles, and those are usually green filtered light, right? They're not filtered, but like you see in green with those right there.
Correct. Usually, yeah, it is a green, grainy looking one, depending on the type you have. Yeah, and then also FLIR. Actually, some new Aura goggles too. But go ahead.
I've heard stories of when this technology was first released, we'll put it that way, that they used red instead of green, and that the red allowed them to see a lot of scary looking things because they used it in Vietnam, right? So there's a war going on, probably not a lot of good energy to be seen to begin with, but like, does like the shade of color have
it's shade, color, all same thing, frequency.
Right.
And I'll tell you, that's what I'm talking about too, and yes, I've used the high-end military, because I'm ex-military, like I mentioned, high-end stuff, but even there, and yes, we have different hues depending on whatever PVS version they were called of night vision. But I also got, and I'm going to open up the website now so I can try and pronounce it right. And when you're talking the red hues or frequencies, you weren't really saying this, but often people think red and or black, negative, dark, evil. No, not the case. That's not a thing. That doesn't correlate over an evil negative to black. And on any level, by the way, and I'll just say that. So if somebody sees a dark entity in their closet at night, okay, well, that's just part of the entity and a certain frequency coming through. I mean, I like chocolate ice cream better than vanilla. So, I mean, who said, I'm having fun with it here, but you see what I'm saying, to get the point across. So,
well, and even that, the frequency you're seeing is just what's not being reflected. So it's not even a representation of what's actually there.
Exactly. Yeah. So you get it too. It's like you're part of a song. So, or just
Yeah.
one
The
instrument.
frequency is just an interaction with the object.
Okay, exactly. So red doesn't mean bad. And again, you weren't saying that, Bill, but I know that some people alluded to that. Maybe that's why they took them away, because you saw the bad guys. Well, what you would see would be living energy, and I'll explain this in a moment, or auras or biofields, as we all know. And these things used to be called, now I'm going to mess this up and I'm going to spell it. Mine shipped 2 days ago to me, which is, here's a synchronicity, Bill, and I didn't tell you about this. Dicyanin, okay, Dicyanin Aura goggles. They were around in the 50s. They were a certain type of, think like a plastic film of a certain hue, made a certain way. So yeah, you could, and they look like 1950s fighter pilot goggles. Anybody listening, search engine it, you'll see what I'm talking about. And they're gone. You'll find some original ones for like stupid prices online, but a certain company has the recipe to make these, and I've had them on pre-order for a couple months. Again, I didn't tell Bill this, and they're going to be brought to and available at this place. So when you put them on, if you look at a human, you see the energy field, the aura, the biofield several inches away, moving just like at a tree or something else. So if you look at an object, think psychometry, I'll just say a bunch of added energy to an object that's not part of that object's own frequency. I know I can get annoying. Then you'll see that on the object and things like that. So there's lots of uses for these. And for those online ones, you're thinking, well, I'm nowhere near Washington. So what? I have a video camera. I'll put those goggles right over that sucker. And yes, it works that way. And I can move around within these haunted, air quotes here, places, because haunted's always play words, energy heightened areas that often entities appear, and you'll see stuff. So we're going to be doing that, and I'll share that online. But yeah, those are those goggles, Bill, that you were talking about with the red film or hue.
So is there
What's the theory on the frequency that you're seeing? Because I know that they've associated like a gamma ray radiation and things at ghost sites, classical ghost sites or places where there's regular emanations. Yeah, is it something along that, like it's in the spectrum of radiation it's detecting or seeing?
Some of it is, it crosses over. We all think linear, like one layer of perceiving. It's actually multiples, of course. And then there's different levels of that radiation is not a radiation on their density. It's a light or things like that. So again, I could bore and spin all our minds for an hour on that. And I don't mean in a good way. So what it is, and we are going in there. I have Geiger counters, big old military grade ones, because I didn't even get to all the trinkets. They're listed on our website. Even dowsing rods and pendulums, and I make the dowsing rods to FLIR camera. So this ties into everything you're asking there, Adam. What it is when the entities are there, and again, I'm just saying entity for an unaware energy form would be another play of words. And if they're aware enough of us and they want to communicate and they start thinking about it, that heightens the frequencies in their aura or biofield, and some of those transition over. And if it's somebody not in an angry mood, let's say, sometimes that picks up as a different energy form over here. So I can't say that this spice is this way to everybody, if that makes sense. But that is what it is. So it's always a different. That's why sometimes when you have your night vision cameras, there's just a quick blop or a quick flash or this, or sometimes it's purple, or it just depends on what that other entity is, energy they're focusing on at the time. And then if they realize that, hey, this feeling that human can see, and if they pick up on that, then they can do it more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you can catch this stuff on film and on camera, like on pictures, right? Not just video film too, right? Everything's
all of it. We'll turn on all our trinkets at once, even a ghost box, and I'll just be quick and just blunt, because I don't really care what I look like. Go in there, I'll hold a frequency, and again, I'll just jump through that recipe, not for secrets, just for time, in the room, and that allows other entities, which is how I do the whole medium thing or communication thing, and they can chat. And then we just did this at that haunted, whatever it is, Zach Bagan's haunted tour we talked about in Vegas. I don't know, a week or two ago. Did the same thing there. And then the ghost boxes, and again, not the radio ones that jump between channels and voices, every other word, just static or white noise. Just turn on because I guess I'll say I hold the other frequencies in my field, which is right there in that field of the ghost box. And so now there's more instruments played. I really wish I had a way of describing this stuff. It frustrates me too. But that's what I do. And it's always, and I can always imagine it different ways. That's the interesting part to me is there's no one way some psychic has to imagine this first and cross their legs with yoga pose, tree frog, or, and I'm not dissing yoga, but whatever, blah, blah, blah. No, you just have to get a thought process and understanding and know it's real in your head. And the more you actually do that, and the more it becomes perceivable in the physical reality. Yeah, so that's about how I can explain that one. So yeah, ghost boxes just straight up English full day. Male and female voice actually kind of shoving each other out of the way, trying to chat over it with everybody in the room hearing it clear as day. Not just some hazy. Oh, did I say mom? My mom's here. No, none of that kind of stuff. It's just like stupid clear. And once you again go at it and have a countless of those experiences, it's just a thing. And as you realize it, then it becomes more of your reality and happens more often, just like the breadcrumbs or synchronicities. So anyway.
So as far as the trinkets go, like, is there any frequency, maybe a UV frequency that would repel anything that would be not in alignment?
Yeah, a lot of things will, and I'll always bring shungite with me. It's not the only energy tool. Everything's an energy tool, a rock, a crystal, a piece of mineral, whatever it is. Or your old crucifix or your whatever. There's lots of things that hold a lot of frequency. So yes, if something's been focused on over the years in a good way around you. So you thought of, let's say grandma passed on and you had this thing that you always think about, okay, well, that has a whole bunch of love energy on it. That is now has that love frequency around it. Bring that with you to a haunted place where there's some entities out of alignment with you. Yes, that would be seen as a repellent because it's a frequency thing. That's not to say that I have to make fun of it. Some really strong, we'll say muscles or energy, muscle-bound entity in there doesn't want to maybe have an effect on your trinket or widget. Well, that's a thing too, and that may be a whole other podcast. So then the energy, the trinket owner needs to always be aware of that stuff. That's why some of these things like at Zach's museum are, again, what they call possessed or haunted. Because, I mean, yeah, you could actually say that on a lot of them. But yeah, shungite, back to your actual question. Shungite would be the best because the grounds are earth. So it's not even as blasting a frequency. It's not the, magic shungite, magic black rock does everything. No, what it does is moves orgone, and talking science here, moves orgone energy or living energy. Okay, living energy, clue there. So keeps stuff moving. It makes stuff hard to attach to you, to hang on to you. You can loosely call it what we call earthing and grounding. And just resetting your biofield. And again, it's not a magic yoga pose or a mountain you got to climb. It's a thought you have to have and then get in the right environment. And shungite's one of those, or go hug a tree. I mean, that's saying, and I'm not making fun of it. That's a legit thing. That's a whole electron exchange happening there. That's great too. But yeah, shungite would be my go-to. And I actually tumble it in silver for a whole, and I'm take half an hour to get in that. So I won't, but I do tumble it in silver for a reason. And that's the cosmic silver shungite. And I don't know how many chiropractors and energy workers we have coming in all the time now, bringing their patients in for that because they do what they call muscle testing. Of course, I'm going to say energy testing and things like that. And it's all legit. And they don't know what they have. I put the little cosmic, which I had a piece sitting right here, cosmic silver shungite in their hand. And it just goes crazy from there as far as helping people restore their own biofield. They heal themselves is what happens. And then in what you were asking, if you're in an environment out of alignment with you, so I'll just say a negative entity, no, they're not going to get near you. They're going to get somebody over in the other group that's in a pissy mood walking around. Like attracts like.
Hey, Derek. If it's a secret recipe, you don't have to mention it, but what's up with tumbling it in the silver? And I ask because I've been carrying a small slab of shungite in my pocket for a couple years now. And about a year ago, I went and bought a Liberty silver dollar and carry them together. in the same pocket, and there's a bunch of silver rubbing off onto the shungite right now.
It does. The silver actually, it's called migration in physics, which is why they don't use pure silver or gold on circuitry anymore, because it'll migrate along energies. So,
Yeah.
and I always like to make this bad joke. I'm not going to bore you with everything here, but no, and there's no secret recipes. I'll get into what I was saying was going to take a while, but it won't. I'll go quickly. No, I believe in sharing everything. I have no secrets. And so what it is, and I'm probably the only fool on the planet, in fact, I'm about positive, who does this. So I kind of go reverse. I take a rock tumbler. For those who don't know, just a rock tumbler. You put rocks and things in there, sometimes a tumbling medium, sands and grits and stuff to polish the rocks to a fine shine often, or whatever level you want. In my case, and I'll tell you, I'm an organic beekeeper for a reason, and there's a reason I'm saying this. Bees, honeycomb, of course, has hexagon cells, little six-sided cells, and that's not random. The bees have been around for a while. They know what they're doing. Think sacred geometry, platonic solids. They kind of know how to make a little energy chamber device. Well, my rock tumbler is hexagon shaped. I take that. I use no other tumbling medium except for, and I have this on video on the website somewhere, showing you me actually doing it, hundreds and hundreds of little tiny silver bars, sometimes silver coins, but only pure silver in there as the tumbling medium. And it's many, many, many thousands of dollars. That's why I say I'm crazy enough to do it. But if you're going to make the good stuff, you can't, you half-ass it. You can't chintz. So it takes pure silver, and it does get eaten up, by the way. Just like you were mentioning, Ben, your coin does as well. That silver will literally, if it's touching the shungite, and I have this under microscope too. I have a high-end high-def digital microscope, and I do some dark field stuff as well, showing this. And all that's already on the website somewhere, mysticalwares.com, showing the silver does migrate onto the shungite. And I'm laughing because I actually have a video. My microscope has high-def video built in, where I'll do my woo-woo, I'll make fun of it, energy zapping at it, and different, and I do this for different things under the microscope. Some of them light up. I actually ordered graphene from a university and had it sent in, recorded me opening the package and all this, put it in the microscope, zapped it with, I'll just say, frequencies or etheric energy, love. And that stuff started sparking on video and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'll get, maybe that's for later too. But on the cosmic silver shungite, I add those hundreds of little pieces of silver, tumble it for 3 days, and there is something to the number 3, just a cohesive, there's been lots of podcasts on that, and there is something to that. So after that, there goes my ear ringing again. After the 3 days of tumbling, we take it out, and then again, I reference the images online. I zoom in on a microscope, and it's just a subtle silver sheen all over the regular, not elite shungite that I tumble for those 3 days. And again, it migrates inside. And we've broken it open. I've lit it up with torches. I do all kinds of crazy experiments in my office. And I put all the videos online. And then that now added again, there's not a science word for it. So I call it a biocompatible frequency. It's like an extra strength shungite. And I've done, I don't know how many tests with, again, and some of them are famous, these chiropractors and sometimes energy workers. But I like to, because people like, doctorates, this, that, and the other. So I'll bring those guys in, and they won't know what they have and do the test. And I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not a doctor in any level, but something about he'll do an example. I'll try to remember Carl Jestrup. Oh geez, I'm gonna butcher his name. But in Renton, Washington, long story short, the people's evidently each of our legs, one is not as long as the other. There's some kind of something going on there. Okay. So you hold that shungite, the cosmic silver shungite, and it lengthens right there on the spot, by the way, and can be measurable. And we don't preempt the patient saying, look, your left leg is 2 inches short and this magic black rock is going to make you even out. No, you don't get into all that. But you do give you the rock and see it, and you get the experiments. And we've had them in on classes, on videos. Some of that's on our, I think, Mystical Wares YouTube channel. Actually, that same doctor doing it. So extra strength shungite that really affects the person's healing themselves capability. And again, it's always, how do you spin the words to get the understanding? It's the strongest version of shungite that a person can use to help heal themselves. And that's what it's used for.
Okay, so the silver basically is amplifying, working as an amplifier for the shungite.
It does, and I have studies on this, by the way. I did not, me in my garage doing some study, and actually the next 2 days, I'm gonna have these up on the website under Shungite FAQ page. I found 50, because these keep disappearing from the internet, by the way, studies on shungite, NOC 60 molecules being used on everything from cucumbers to boars to rats to being used with silver in combination for healing. I like to call them, because the C60 molecule is the shape of a buckyball or a soccer ball. So, and it's an energy tool, not just a physical one that has to be remembered. And then because of that, and they blended it with silver. Scientists, and this is a study from a university or a journal. It's all, I got the actual study, not just me telling you about it. And a lot of them are up there now, by the way. And what I was saying was a lot of these keep disappearing from the internet. So I actually paid for a bunch of I don't know what they were called, publishing sites and journals, online accounts, so I can get access to these studies. And I'm downloading the PDFs and storing them on my own server. And I printed them because actually, and this is another podcast, some of these have disappeared from my server, and I don't even know how to explain that. And the link on my website disappeared. But regardless, I've got printouts now, so I don't quite know how those are going to disappear, and others. And I'll provide these online showing where shungite and silver is being used by medical doctors and physicists to boost healing from everything from leukemia to oh my gosh, I can go on. Liver cancers. I don't remember the name. Carcia. Again, I'm not a doctor. Carcina something or other. Lots of things, and again, these are all studies, not just people's personal stories. So, a great healing tool.
So is there an area of effect that a certain size would have? And I guess I'm comparing this to electroculture, because I did read that a 6-foot antenna built with copper tubing would cover about 225 square feet. Now, is there any kind of translation to like a X amount heavy chunk of shungite would affect, a small living room or whatever, right?
No, the answer is no, because a small piece, the size of your fingernail is not, air quotes here, stronger than a big old chunk. And I literally have the biggest chunks available anywhere. I get them straight from the mine. So I got the biggest ones there are. And I make fun of it all the time. I'm like, even in the store, I say, I'm not going to try and sell you this huge old piece when this little, and they're $1. In fact, we give them away free all the time. I'll talk people out of it because it's all about the understanding. And energetically, I know if I stay honest like that, somebody will buy some other trinket from me to help me pay the bills. So that's why I stay so painfully honest. But the answer is no. You don't need 5 pounds, and I've heard it all. 5 pounds or this many ounces of shungite to water for 3 days under this, that, and blah, 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 blah. No, it's an energy tool. It's a frequency. Time does not exist. So remove the time factor from your recipe, whoever's talking shungite. And then it's energy. It's not volume. And you're not saying this, but you don't need 5 pounds, 4 ounces, or whatever the number is of shungite to have an effect energetically. That's not a thing. I mean, do you need a bigger hug from your grandma to feel the love? Come on. No, we all know that. And of course, I'm making fun of this. No. So as long as the energy worker has the right understanding and doesn't go into it thinking, so-and-so shungite master said I needed this much for this. Well, then have fun with that. That's called a belief system. All right, enjoy. I'm not a real patient guy. So I don't limit myself to that stuff. Again, I'm mocking this and having fun with it. But if we come at our reality that way, then we're not hindered and we get out of our own way by these limitations. So no, a little tiny piece of shungite in your pocket is just as strong as a big old whatever, beat it around your neck, as long as you don't limit yourself. Now, that's the volume or sound, let's say, the effect, but now you can add on instruments. Again, tough thing to talk about, by doing the silver. So then affect more frequencies. So if that makes sense. Again, it's a difficult thing to talk about. It's like trying to speak electricity, talking amps, watts, volts.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
So would then that same little chunk, as opposed to a big chunk, have a beneficial effect on like a whole field of crops, even though It's just a one little tiny little guy. And
Yeah. It's called quantum entanglement, of course. That little guy has the same frequency. It's just like copying a song from a big computer onto a USB drive. Makes no difference. The song's going to be the same. So now, again, we're past the size thing. I know you're already past that. So now, as far as it having an effect, it's energy, it's frequency. It's not limited by space and time. So if we start, and you weren't doing that, but if we start thinking, well, then we need a chunk every 2 inches. All right, well, then you're going to spend a whole lot of energy called money in buying a whole hell of a lot of chunks. I would be that aware energy worker and know that, oh no, I got enough love for this. Let's go the whole crowd of people rather than one. Because, that's a thing too. A performer doesn't have to individually look at every single person. And I have to have weird descriptions for this. So, and I'm going to pause that odd analogy and just say, as long as the person putting the piece of shungite in the energy field, because everything has its own energy field. I don't care if it's a car, a spatula on your counter, or your garden has a collective energy field. Yeah, every plant does as well, but a chorus of its own. As long as you have the understanding, you're entering that little love instrument, let's call shungite that, into that overall band playing. Oh, I'm so horrible. And I'm having to do this on the fly, people. I'm sorry. Then it will have an effect on that. So again, it's your awareness level. Or throw it under that one plant in the far north corner. It's going to affect the one plant. No, it can affect it all. Again, just be aware that you're affecting the whole garden. Put it in the field. And by the way, it affects glyphosate, scientific fact, which is Roundup weed killer, and rad particles, which is radiation, of course. Spread shungite in there. And it straight up has an effect, and on the molecules, the molecular structure breaks them up. And the same thing when it's ingested, the carbon-60 molecule does on what's called free radicals, which is why it's curing cancers in every animal they feed it to.
And this is unique. That frequency is unique just for shungite. Like I can't put a hunk of amethyst out there and expect the same results, right?
No, and amethyst is crystalline, of course, so that holds a frequency. It's programmable. Shungite's not programmable. You can add something to it like I do with silver, and like I said, add an instrument to the band, but you're not going to change it. Where a crystal, I pull straight up color out of crystals all the time, and rocks sometimes. Like a green rock will be gray or hazy or whatever. Your smoky quartz crystal will go stupid clear. And not just, oh, it's a little bit shade lighter. You can see through the thing. And I do, and I'm not the only one. There's no way. I don't know what it'd be called. Somebody out there listening, send us a message, tell me what that's called. And others got to be doing it. But no, that can be done. So that's reprogrammable if you say amethyst.
So and then that would not apply to shungite then. Shungite has like a set frequency that it's putting out all the time then, right? Because it's not a crystal.
Yeah, it's I don't have a bad joke for it, but it's like an old floppy disk that is, I'm an old guy, that can't be formatted. You flip the little button on it. I forget that was even called, but non-formattable. Yeah, so shungite cannot be formatted. So it holds the same frequency. I've never seen
Well, is it more like it's channeling a frequency then?
Good for you. Yes, it does.
Like in the idea that when you have an electric motor, you have that little chunk of graphite that runs up against the motor, and it's highly conductive, highly electrical. But if you wanted to make like an antenna out of it, you couldn't. It doesn't, resonate and accept radio signals well. But if you throw some metal on the outside of it, now you have these two beautiful things kind of working together.
And think orgone device when you add the metal. So when you orgone or organite, depending on how you want to word it, but that's too, once you start adding those metals on top of organic carbon, C60 molecule shungite, same thing. On those, you start layering them, and then, hey, put it in your hand. There's another layer of the organite device that hasn't been talked about. That can be one. Now you've got those three, and it's more layers than three, because again, I've hyper analyzed shungite under microscopes. There's a lot going on in there. But yeah, hold that piece of cosmic silver shungite in your hand. Again, your hand is another layer of the orgone device, and then use your imagination. There's my ear again. Imagination and feelings, and then that's your tuner. And then have fun with it. Get creative. I mean, the limits are limitless. So yeah, but it does do that tuning. How do I tell you that? That's why I say grounding or earthing. It just continues that energy frequency. And that's why it's sometimes said it gets rid of negative or heavy energy.
So it sounds like that doing anything electroculture based, which is what I was explaining about earlier, putting the stake of wood in the ground wrapped in copper wire. That's just basically an orgonite device then, right? Because we've got the wood,
It's
which is
100% one if that's what you do. Yeah, we make them. They're sometimes called cloud busters. I made them for years. I make little handheld ones you can hold your hand, embedded in sometimes resin, often organic beeswax is how I prefer it, with different shungite and crystal and stuff going on in this recipe we can call it an orgone device, and it's layered. And that's again a whole story behind that. But yeah, when you're doing these rods and the 6 foot ones, yeah, I mean, there's something to that when you're out there. If you're trying to get, I know I was just in a whole spiel about volume and length and all that. But if you're trying to do a larger area out there, like a large garden, the larger copper rods, you got to get into the whole Wilhelm Reich stuff and then other scientists. You guys know about all that. To get into specific on that, but it does have an issue. And I've made those. But now, depending on what you're trying to do with your garden, if you're trying to move that physical stuff like the rad particles and glyphosate, well then no, walk around with a container of shungite. So get a salt shaker, an empty one, fill it with shungite powder. Every little particle doesn't have to touch. And so I'm just explaining that to everybody. Walk around, and if you feel shaking that shungite out of that salt shaker a little more in this area, that area, yeah, do that. It's called clearing. It's called smudging. It's called a lot of things. You're moving the energies. That's what I would do to help on the physical level for the, again, rad particles, glyphosates, Roundup, energetically. That's when we were talking about that one piece, because then it's a frequency thing. But if you have a bunch of frequency rad particles radiation, well, then that's when I said use your intuition and shake that shungite powder over there. So it really depends on your environment.
I did do that actually a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I walked around the property with some shungite, like it was pulverized powder that I got from Derek. We've got about 5 acres, mostly woods out here, and I spread it. Me and my wife spread it all around, and just it's been a few years, but I was wondering, once you do that, because they're so fine, like they'll eventually disperse, and then you've got we're in Michigan, so lots of precipitation and road salt. Is the road salt that's coming off the road going to not cancel out like salt? What is the interaction between salt and shungite, I guess is my question.
Similar to crystals and shungite, salt's programmable. Anything crystalline is, in short, and they respond differently. But okay, so in that case, so your property, let's say, borders a highway or a street, whatever, where they do the salt and gets snow plowed off, I would probably every year sprinkle, again, not a huge amount, but salt, walk through that area and shake some more salt or shungite over that, because it's not that there's bad guys hanging on salt particles in your ditch or something like that. It's just that, yes, that salt, depending on where it came from and whether it was reset or not, has a frequency. We don't think about that when we drink our bottled water. Well, it came from A to B, sometimes through this environment, or even hyper focused down to the pissed off truck driver who had a bad mood or blah, blah, blah. And this happened. He's driving around in angry frequency. Well, yeah, that's going to affect your water bottle if he's driving in the back. So anyway, back to the salt, same thing there. I don't know where that salt was taken. I'm not saying it's all negative and be scared. I'm saying, hey, it's a reprogrammable thing. Or walk out through a salt, either way, have love energy. Have the cheesy thought in your head. This is love frequency. And when I'm dropping these little butterflies, have fun with it in your head, whatever you want to do. But have that positive thought or feeling when you're doing it with either shungite powder or adding more salt to that strip we're talking about, maybe near your property. You'll reset it all. You'll clear it. And that's, again, how you clear heavy energies in places. The bigger energy wins. That's just and that's even in memories and dreams. Or bad. That's why bad memories and good memories seat so well in us, because we have big emotion tied to them. Where other memories, energies, songs we've heard don't get repeated or accessible as easy because there's not emotion behind them as much. And that's what really seats them. So then I'm telling you, get imaginative and emotional, not cry, but emotional, like, hell yeah, this is working. My magic shungite powder, I'm spritzing on my ground. And then, yes, it does. That's how it really goes. You're getting all energy layers involved. So then, yeah, I would redo it.
So it sounds like that would be like that's an example of keeping up with or being aware of outside influences that could affect, like if you have a trinket like a cross we were talking about earlier, or like whatever widget that you carry that is some kind of property that you're trying to maintain. That would be like the salt would be an example, like since we're taking care of the land, right? In this case,
Mhm.
I make the analogy, it would
Called etheric hygiene. Yeah, because you, of course, we take, and I'll use the example back on us. We take for physical showers or baths every day, every other day, something like that for our physical bodies, the stuff that gets on us, but we're not taught etheric hygiene. Ask a scientist or a physicist, they'll tell you you're 10% physical, 90% metaphysical, but you're not taught how to etheric, I'll call it etheric hygiene. Take care. At best, we're taught go hug that tree or chill out for a while or have a drink, blah, blah, blah. That's the best we're taught. No, that's your emotion. That's why I get into that whole armoring process and stuff. No, I won't get into it right now, but it does matter. And that's, yes, you're doing the etheric hygiene of the land. You don't just pull the weeds, you gotta do the energy, and energies change. Driving down the road, and I'm not saying, ooh, every car is a negative energy. No, but there's, again, I hate the word just energy because how vague is that? Yes, different energies entering that environment, and some of them are out of alignment. So I'd clean up that area however you feel you need to.
Well, that's the way you're talking with the salt, especially. It's just talk about synchronicity. I use salt a lot to clear energy and recharge a lot of the pocket stones I work with. And it occurred to me a while back that salt being crystalline and programmable to do that, I will say an incantation, I suppose, maybe. Prayer would be another way to do that, but bless salt in a way so it is it brightens the energy, let's say, um or lightens it up a little bit. And when I started doing that and working with other practitioners and getting some feedback on the idea, kind of came up with the idea of doing it as you're going by the county maintenance buildings that have the big pile of highway salt, and just letting that highway salt work for the collective in that way too. So I'm pretty sure I did that when I came up and visited you guys, Bill. So I
awesome.
wouldn't worry about it too much.
I think there was a story in the news about them salting the Boston or New York or something. They had blessed it, like a priest or somebody had blessed it for some reason. I don't know.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe I'll dig it out or not. But Ben, did you have anything for the new business segment, or Adam? I have a little something, but not anything spectacular before we get to the third segment for new business.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm can't think of anything offhand.
Well, last time Adam was on the show, we talked about Chat GPT and AI, and I had never used it before. I was kind of hesitant to. So Adam graciously took me aside after the show, and we had a little conversation, and I tried Chat GPT, and I just wanted to report back that it's not anything like, it's not AI is going to take over the world. It's not anything scary, but it is super freaking useful in that it'll take the place of Google. It takes your search results and just gives you the answers. So Adam was sharing with me that he used it for a recipe, which is where we got the title for one of the last episodes, Beans of Light and Meatloaf. He made AI meatloaf recipe. But so instead of just like searching for meatloaf recipe and then going through all the results and picking out your best one, you can, modify it and ask it to remove certain things and add things and whatnot. So what I used it for was I asked it for the top 20 highest foods in protein that don't come from meat. And it gave me a list, but it only spit out, and I didn't create an account or anything, so it's probably my fault, but it only spit out like 7 or 8 items on the list at once, and then I had to prompt it again and ask it like what else, and then it would spit it out the next few, and sometimes it would repeat. So it does have some work to do. It's definitely not anywhere close to taking over the world. But yeah, Adam, I just wanted to thank you for introducing me to
What website was that?
Chat GPT.
Yeah, just go to openai.com and go to their chat. But yeah, I use it for everything. I'm right now learning Unity. I'm getting into trying to teach myself how to make video games, specifically on the audio end. It's where I'm really interested, at least getting into it. And I'm involved in a project. And yeah, just the learning and the tools and the usefulness, and even things like what questions should I be asking? In other words, in other situations, what other questions have other people asked? And it kind of goes out there, brings me back these things. I'm like, oh, those are things I need to know I didn't need to know. So yeah, I love it as a tool. To me, it's like a powerful calculator just on reorganizing information. Not a right answer, not a wrong answer. If you type the wrong equation into the calculator, you know, doesn't mean that the math is wrong. It just means that you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, I think somebody just launched a rival AI chat thing. I think it might have been Elon, but
Well,
outside.
and this is going to become more ubiquitous. Look at any technology, where whether it's in encryption or coding or just basic internet protocols or search engines, just the way that we do things, eventually everybody kind of homogenizes. And yeah, once people kind of figure out how this stuff works and is structured, and that becomes old news, um, it's going to be powerful. Where I see the real power is just on my own data. If I have something that I can structure for my own data and search my own data, and it just has the ability to go and do its own transcriptions and pull from anything that I've ever written or thought, and then I go and think in my head, I'm like, oh, what was that video on this? I actually might be able to search exactly through my own database, through my own things, and find things super, super quick. And the other cool thing that they've done is they're now integrating APIs and keys that are going to make this thing insanely powerful. So that, let's say there's some system, some equation, some database that would actually have the real engineering answers. You can now have an API where ChatGPT, if it can't find the answer, will then go into somebody else's database and pull this information out. So yeah, it'll be kind of like in the early days of the web, when everybody was, connecting, and you finally got to see old newspapers, and then you got to start really getting all this research. And I think it's going to kind of do that same thing. So I'm not scared, you know.
No, it's not scary. It's exciting, but it kind of does make one wonder, like, what is the actual level of technology that hasn't been released? Like,
Well, and it's super dangerous, because if you rely on these technologies, they're bad. So I'm on the edge of it still. It's kind of like, if you have a car, people don't look to put their turn signal on, because their car tells them when a car is next to them automatically. Like, you don't have to look. You don't remember your phone number because you don't have to. So that's really going to be, the edge here. Is it powerful like a calculator and people forgot how to do written math and it doesn't matter? Or do we start allowing it to make decisions on our lives and how we do things? Because we're already doing all that, whether people realize it or not. We are controlled by the machines. If you're following around your GPS, this thing is dictating the movement, the traffic, the flow. And this has been going on for so many decades. Traffic lights are us sitting and obeying the machines.
obey.
So yeah, I'm already, my mindsets were so deep. I'm sitting here talking through electronics with wires hooked up to my head. So the machines have won.
We're in the Matrix, but we're not of the Matrix. How about that?
The simulated matrix that we're in.
Speaking of, I mean, it is a dream, and this ties very well into the Toltec, the ancient Toltec wisdom viewpoint of the world dream. I believe he calls it, Don Miguel refers to it as a mitote. I didn't write that because I didn't write that down because it's not in the chapter I went over. That's in the beginning of the book. But so there's this world dream, and the world dream is something that we kind of is forced upon us. And then there's the dream that we make that are for ourselves. And he actually calls this the awareness, or of the second dream. or the, let me look at this real quick. Awareness of the awareness of this second attention. I'm sorry. So the awareness of the dream of the first attention is the world dream, right? This mitote, and then we have our own personal ones. And once we are aware that there is a distinction here, then we can create heaven on earth. We can change our trajectory, right? Because we realize that we're no longer a victim and we're in control, and that makes us a warrior. But I'm getting a little off topic because it's not where the chapter starts. It actually starts with a discussion on freedom. So freedom is something that Adam and I kind of touched on pretty heavily on 13 questions, and the idea of sovereignty and like what does that mean, right? Wouldn't you agree, Adam? Is it just
Yeah.
something we talked about, right?
Yeah. Freedom is a thing.
Yeah, sorry, just had to take a drink there. But Don Miguel says that freedom has to do with the human spirit. And I'm just reading off my notes here, guys, so please feel free to jump in and interrupt me. It's not really anything that's super laid out, so please feel free to jump in. So he says that freedom has to do with the human spirit, and freedom freedom means to be the ability to be who we really are, right? So we can't blame anybody but ourselves from keeping us from being free. So we like to play the blame game, and this is part of the belief system that comes with being a victim, right? So instead of blaming anybody, the buck stops with us, right? So we're taking responsibility. And then he goes on to give the example of children as what a free human looks like. He calls them the wild, because if you look at a child 2 to 3 years old, usually they're smiling, they're happy, they're exploring the world, they're not really thinking about the past or the future, and they're generally carefree, right? And they're only living in the present. So this is kind of the state in which we should strive for, but minus the innocence right now, because we're not children anymore. We're men or adults. So we have wisdom to apply, and this helps us reach back to this state. So because we find ourselves kind of domesticated like this, the question arises, like, how did we get domestic? How did we go from wild to domesticated? And with the warrior mentality, this is completely a normal happening, right? This is, I guess, been around since the Toltecs, right? So a pretty long time. And the victim would say that this happening is a sad thing. He would qualify it as sad, and he would play the poor me card, right? So
I mean, it could be as simple as us living in a building, Bill. Look at what happens to a pig when you domesticate it. Take away the fences and the support, and all of a sudden it's something different. So, yeah, it could just be our lifestyle.
yeah, I mean, speaking of architecture, I mean, architecture is meant, good architecture is meant to inspire men. I mean, it's supposed to be beautiful and to speak to the creator within themselves that lives within all of us. And we don't see that architecture anymore. It's all boxy windows and glass, and there's no arches, there's no old, all the old world technology that pulls ether out of the atmosphere is gone. It's destroyed, and we're left with ugly looking skyscrapers, which are depressing, right? Anyway. So yeah, these belief systems, like I've said before, he goes on to say that we inherit these from generation to generation, and it comes with a judge and a victim, right? We're our own worst critics. We're always judging ourselves, and we're playing the victim cards. Well, not the hypothetically, right? I'm not trying to say this specific group of people, obviously, but so in order to get rid of the victim, right, the first step is to become aware that there is this world dream that we're kind of caught up in. And so what this awareness allows us to do is to rebel, and this is the opportunity to stop and to say that this is enough of choosing to suffer in the world dream, and now we're going to take back control of it and refocus and create our own personal dreams, or our own manifestations, right? Which we use our imagination to do. But he does give 3 masteries that Toltecs must use to become a complete human being, I guess. And it's not his words, but basically the point. And 3 masteries are the masteries of awareness, the mastery of transformation, and the mastery of intent. And he goes on to explain that intent is basically God. Intent is love. So is this the 3rd mastery is the mastery of love, which makes sense, right? So we've got this parasite in our mind with this belief system, with this judge and this victim, and it's making us sick. It's making us domesticated. And the food for this parasite are fear-based emotions. It's the negative emotions. And he goes on to say that in all shamanic traditions, they frame warriors as humans that are rebelling against this parasite. So warriors transcend the dream of the planet, which is influenced by the parasite, and we change our we change it with our personal dream, and that's how we create heaven. So that's what we call heaven, right? And then he gives 3 ways to kill the parasite, which I thought was really interesting. So I will share them here after I take a drink. If anybody else has any thoughts, feel free. Great. 3 ways to kill the parasite is facing every fear one-on-one, right? So think of every fear as the head of a hydra, right? So chop off the head of each fear one by one. Kind of takes a while, right? But it gets the job done. And then the second way to kill the parasite is to stop feeding the parasite. And then the 3rd way to get rid of this parasite from your mind is called the initiation of the dead, which we'll get to at the end here. But the first step, as we've said, to master is awareness of realizing that we have this world dream, and the awareness of the second dream so basically, once we're aware the first dream exists, we can create the second dream. This is the awareness of the second dream. And the difference is that we're no longer children at this point. When we make this decision, when we come to this realization, we're not innocent anymore. We have this decision to make, which requires wisdom, right? And then the second step so that's the awareness is the first step, and the second step is to inventory all of our fear-based agreements and transform them. And we reprogram them, we transform them using the 4 agreements, which we'll get into in later episodes. It's a super short book, by the way, so anybody, I would highly recommend it to anybody. It's very, very short comparatively, in my opinion. So, and then he gives this super interesting analogy for using the agreements that he calls them, that when we adopt them, that we go to war. It's a declaration of war, and we go into the desert to meet our demons. And it is there in the desert that our demons are transformed into our angels, and they are there to help us instead of hurt us, right? So I thought that was a pretty cool analogy. And then the last 2 sections of the chapter has to deal with the discipline of the warrior, and then the last is the initiation of the dead. And the 2 points I wanted to pull out of the discipline of the warrior is that he mentions that forgiveness is key, and the reason to forgive isn't because the person whom you have perceived as wronged you deserves forgiveness. We forgive others because we love ourselves so much that we don't want to keep ourselves in that suffering pattern. and keep paying for that injustice, right? So the idea is that we love ourselves so much that we forgive others so that we can heal our own wounds, right? And that takes time, obviously. And you'll know that the healing is complete because, well, you won't have a negative reaction to whatever it was that you healed when it pops up again, right?
I would add to that, Bill, in learning how to forgive others, you learn how to forgive yourself, right? So in healing that wound, that perceived wound from someone else, you're healing it within your own sphere as well.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. When one forgives, two people are affected, right? Yourself and the other person on an energetic level. With if if they're aware of it, I guess. I guess it isn't. Time doesn't exist either, so I can't say that. But the only other aspect of as far as the discipline of a warrior that stuck out to me that he points out is basically stoicism. And I'm a huge fan of stoicism, not because I studied philosophy in college. I didn't even know about stoicism until after I got out of college, but it is a school of philosophic thought which kind of emphasizes the control of one's emotions. And when people think of a stoic person, they think of somebody that has no emotions, but that is as far from the truth as possible. Stoicism is about expressing your emotions at the right place and at the right time, and it's not about repressing your emotions. So it's learning how to deal with these things in a healthy manner, and of course that also takes some practice. But the third way to kill the parasite in our mind that he gives us is what he calls the initiation of the dead, which also reminded me of a Stoic. I don't know if it's Stoic, but it's certainly a more Western philosophical idea of memento mori, which is remembering that eventually that you will die, which doesn't really sound like a very good thing to think about every day when you wake up, right? You want to think this is the best day ever, and I'm gonna carpe diem, right? But with the idea, so the idea behind this initiation of the dead is to keep us living in the present. So we let the past be the past, and the angel of death, we let that take take that away, and being choosing to be joyful because well, that's beside the past. I mean, it's helpful that that happens, but the main point is realizing that everything is temporary, right? And we have two choices at this point. We can either be sad and suffer, which suffering is totally a choice, or we can be joyful about it and be happy and celebrate. And being joy, there's a difference between joyfulness and happiness. So I believe that you can have joy without being happy, which sounds weird, but does that make sense to anybody else but me?
It makes perfect sense, Bill. And looking like the memento mori, realizing uh, that you will die. I look at that and seizing the day as going hand in hand, right? It's kind of um sitting bull or not sitting bull, crazy horse, right? It's a good day to die, right? And that means you lived yesterday to its fullest, and you're planning on living today to its fullest, and you can die happy knowing that you're doing so.
Yeah, it's definitely that ties right into one of the agreements of doing your best, which is the fourth one that he covers, and which is, I guess, the one that we'll talk about the next episode. But the analogy that he gave about being out in the desert made me think of you, Ben, because I know that you've spent a lot of time out in the desert.
Oh yeah, and getting that is a spectacular place to get to know your demons. And um it's funny you said they changed to angels. Um I'd forgotten about that. And it is it's an accurate way to look at it too, you know. Um having your demon become a helper, and so to speak. It's sort of a permaculture idea that the problem is the solution, so you can um, get to know that demon well enough that the problem's not a problem anymore.
And isn't even the term demon like kind of like a Hollywood term? I think it was
Yeah, for sure.
Greek daemon. Right.
Plato referred to his daemon. Yeah, and that's another way to say higher self, right? So, assigning a negative or positive to it is entirely up to you.
Right. Which goes into the which makes me think of the whole moral relativism, like slippy, like morality and ethics. I think I have learned that those are very two subjective areas when it comes to objective ideas, and philosophy it can be accomplished without addressing those areas specifically, because they have to do with the context in which the society is living, right? So if a society of cannibals is going to have different morals than a society of not cannibals. So that is a very interesting topic in itself. But back to the death thing. I think that just being around somebody, I don't know if anybody's ever been close with somebody that has passed and been in the same room or in the same house, but or spent time with them leading up to that moment. But it is kind of sobering in the truest it can be. I mean, if you're aware and thinking about these things in the truest sense of the form, it really brings home the temporality of things, because once we die, we're out of time, or at this time anyway. There's a pun there. We're supposed to laugh.
Well, I was just muted.
So yeah. Speaking of that, I guess I'll ask this kind of random question as we wrap up for Derek and regarding dead people and people have passed on and capturing them on film. I remember this one Christmas, Derek, I was with another lady I was dating at the time, and we were celebrating at her house, and they were taking pictures. And I remember looking at the pictures later, and there were orbs all over the house. And there was this one picture where there was an orb right behind my head, or to the side or whatever, but there was a face of an old lady in it, and she was looking at me. Do you have any, I don't know, it's pretty vague, and it was a long time ago. In general, I don't have any specific names or who that might have been, but was that somebody related to me, I guess, is my curiosity here, or was that another entity?
Yeah, and often those orbs, of course, they're not that and nobody's saying this, but the entity is not like crammed in this little orb.
Right.
Much like Adam was saying earlier, it's what we're perceiving on this part. So yes, often from these physical bodies, we perceive an orb, which is an entity. And in this case, it was an older lady. She wasn't saying like she's a relative, but she's like somebody who took care of you. So I don't know, nanny, or you had someone in your life that was taking care of you earlier on. Is what it was.
Okay.
So now that she's passed on, she's what I call a spirit guide. And then when they know, disincarnate entities know that you're in that heightened environment, or you're going to take a picture, they're going to do their best to, make as much energy perceivable as possible, depending on the person or the trinket in front of them. But yeah, it was an older lady is what it was. On that one.
Not on this lifeline time, not related to me at all.
Oh, no, it was in this timeline is when you were young. So it's gonna be like a friend of your mom's, a nanny or something like that. I don't have a name.
Right.
She's
But not a blood relative.
No, not a blood relative.
Gotcha.
And you had 3 other orbs around you at the same time too. At least 3 at the same time, because there was 2 off to the right of her and 1 to the left, which were other individuals, wanting to be picked up on, chatted with if you thought about them. And that's how it usually come through. Just a kind of a subtle thought in your head. that's that whole psychic perception thing that we all have and usually ignore, but we're all psychics. It just depends how much you pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah, I remember it was a long time ago, and I was really into reading about exorcisms at that point in time. So it was kind of scary, not scary, but off-settling. It was cool, right? I mean, it was cool to look at, but then, I didn't know. I wasn't this far down the path at that time, so it was kind of off-settling, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like hearing a new type. I always like try to go to, well, let's go for a food analogy this time. A new type of food, going to a new country, looks a little odd, you're not sure, it's like that, but that doesn't mean bad. That just means, so a new recipe. But yeah, there's lots of entities. I mean, gosh, there's no limit to that. It's how far are you imagining, which means, how far you tune in your radio. It's all here all the time. Where's your focus? Just like a radio. All the channels are there. Just where did you tune the radio dial?
So, in speaking of where and being aware of where we are, like, so keeping ourselves centered and in the present, does that then have an effect on the ability for other entities to interact or not interact with us?
You do kind of choose the frequencies you're on. So I would have, it's a play of words like I keep saying, but I choose to see more of myself or selves here in the here and now, or another way of saying other aspects of myself now, or integrating other aspects. I always like lots of ways of saying it in the here and now, so that then you perceive on more levels. It's like saying, I have a wine taster me. Well, then you're gonna have a heightened sense of taste buds and smell buds, I guess. And then if you're this, that, and so other versions of yourself in the here and now, again, there's always ways of rewording that, because I don't want somebody to think there's one way to make bread. Lots of ways to make bread. But yeah, and though it doesn't make anything, you're not like stuck on a set, anywhere saying that, but stuck on a set thing. It makes you, if you stay grounded in the earth, centered, focused, yes, those in alignment with you can communicate easier. That's how I would probably word that.
Makes sense. After I asked it, I was like, yeah, of course it does. But what do you guys think about this idea of a parasite in our minds? Is that a good analogy to use to describe the sickness that we see, that I guess rampant at this point in the world?
I think it's a really good way to describe it, more than one aspect of it too. There's a guy by the name of Jerry Marzitsky I've been paying attention to for a while now, and was turned onto guided to learn more about how he operates. And yeah, a lot of these energies that can attach, or entities, if you want to use that language, he likens it to a mind parasite as well. And I don't know, we kind of got into it last week too, but he's the way he's a clinical psychiatrist, who worked in the system, in the state system in California in the 70s. And when that was shut down, moved into the prison system and did some interesting interviews with his patients once he got into the prison system, and some of the rules on how they interacted with the patients changed. And it's fascinating to hear him talk about these attachments being parasites of the mind, and really controlling the individual, and the individual knowing it's not in alignment, not self, and being something else.
That's interesting you mentioned that, Ben, because I think listeners don't quite know, but I'm also a retired correctional officer, a prison guard for 16 years at a maximum security prison. So yeah, here in Monroe, Washington. So, and the interactions I would have with these inmates or convicts, or, you know, they keep changing the name over the years. The stories they tell me, they weren't real limited. So I'm literally was at, we were called COs. It would sit down, and I had, I don't know, 12 serial killers on my unit that would sit down, depending on where I was working that time, on the unit that I could sit down with and literally just have a chat with. And then the entities or attachments, you know, again, whatever they call them, over them. Oh yeah, they had writers, and they would tell me about them, and, you know, maybe me, I'd perceive them. And I had 16 years at that place. It was a lot going on, we'll say.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'd, you know, being sensitive to these energies, and also being one who helps spirits cross, if I drive by a prison now, man, I got to duck, or, you know, up my armor, so to speak, if I know one's coming, but you don't always know they're coming. So
And then what about, so what about the analogy of going to war then? Is this a healthy thing to do, Derek? I guess I'm asking for your opinion, because when we talk about healing, we talk about the thing already being accomplished. So if we're constantly in this state of rebellion against our parasite in the mind, like, is there ever really a true end to that besides death?
Oh yeah, it's a realization. No, you just have to have the aha moment. I don't know, you can call it lots of things, that you're the I am, and there's lots of understandings, but realize you are in control. And that's how I did it. So all of a sudden, when I became more energy sensitive, started hearing the different entities, talking to them, and things like that. I'm like, you know, I mean, because that's a thing. And of course, some people, their little diagnosis, well, you're hearing voices, you're schizophrenic. I'm like, well, I can see the entities. So these people are actually hearing things. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. So, and it's an energy thing, not a chemical issue. So then realizing that, and then then you think, well, and I got into the mindset, well, if it's all on, you hear it all. No, it's not. Wake up in your head, calm down, make a decision, because your conscious thoughts are what really control the metaphysical. There's no set recipe. Like I say, joke about, throw away Betty Crocker's cookbook. Just get in the kitchen and cook, try and figure it out. And the more you realize that, you'll realize there's less to do than you think. So no, I don't get attachments, or if I don't want entities, in my odd terms, out of alignment with me, the bad guys I'll make fun of, well, then I tune them out. I just shut them off. I just literally say they're not going to be, and they go away. And I won't get all that. So anyway, I do whole sessions doing that kind of stuff too. And it can be done remotely. But yeah, so anyway, you're never stuck in it, and you just have to realize that. So it's really a realization that you're not stuck in anything, because I used to have what's OCD. It's lots of versions of OCD, and I understand that. But as far as like counting things in my head, I would count in stupid huge numbers, or the edges and size, all while I'm focusing on 2 or 3 different things, just like a lot going on, let's say, that you would think would be uncontrollable. And they used to try and head med me with the Prozacs, the Paxils, you know, throw it at it. That's not what it was. It was an energy thing. And then me realizing, stop, and it just, again, I can't give you an exact recipe, not that you're asking, but it really is a realization in our heads. Not
Well, think of it like a real parasite. It needs something to grow in, and it's the environment. So yeah, the parasite of the mind, the counting, that OCD obsession, if you change the mindset, it can't grow there. So I mean, it's the same thing as, you know, getting a parasite in your mind that'll make you more aggressive because, you know, you're around a lot of cats, or it could be a mental virus. I think they kind of both have that same flavor.
That's a good description.
well, and not all parasites are bad too. If, like the counting, right, being a vehicle to keep an area occupied,
That's such a great point.
you know, you can have a symbiotic parasite in a mantra, as you know, being the same thing.
Well, and
So,
think of it, and to you know, to create an allegory back onto humans. There's people that treat autoimmune disease with hookworms because we've eradicated through cleanliness certain parasites. So here in the West, we don't have them. And some people's systems are fighting their own system because theory, you get hookworms, and some people, the autoimmune disease goes away because their body is now fighting those parasites, which we've always had. You use it or you lose it. So, yeah, that's really interesting to think, choose your parasites, choose the things, Sometimes that inner demon is what drives you and gives you fuel to do the good things.
I like the point that you brought up, Ben, but to split hairs, it would no longer be a parasite at that point if it was symbiotic. If it's benefiting you, then it changes the relationship and then it's no longer just sucking your negative energy, right? It's actually giving you something.
Well, maybe a parasite that's also in symbiosis, that same thing. The parasite technically isn't giving you anything back. It's leeching off in its own device, but the system you have utilizes it being there. It's part of the system. And when that's out of whack, and this goes into the domestication, we have removed ourselves from the environment, from frequency, from, the animals, the critters, all the terpenes, the entire environment. And we've, created sterile rooms with, completely unnatural frequencies.
Well, and it's going back to the book. It is just turning your demon into an angel, right? I mean, it's the same kind of idea there. And
yeah, that's beautiful. That's what I mean. I think that's the only way to go through life. How does anybody survive horrific events or horrific things that they've done other than to go, well, here's the feeling you get from this. That's never going to happen again. And it goes from being the horror to me, fire, drives an engine.
Yeah, the changing your demons to angels, that's the mastery of transformation. It's the second mastery that he gives after awareness. And then the third one being the mastery of intent or love, which I guess would be a little bit more forward thinking. Like if we're going to talk in terms of past, future, and present, right? Awareness would be something that we have in the present. I guess it's all kind of in the present. Transformation would, well, we can affect, because you can reprogram past events, not reprogram, but you can have an effect on past events. You can't, tell me if I'm just talking off the top of my head here, but you can't change the past, but you can kind of energetically alter the outcome. So like when we go to rewrite a traumatic event in our lives and try to understand it and heal it, right? We're not changing what happened, but we're changing our understanding with it, which happens in the past, right?
I mean, if you benefit from precognition.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, that's you can affect your perception of it, of the past. So in essence, you are, because there's no past. I mean, it's always, again, play of words, but because it's still repeating in you, you can change, let's call it a song again. You can change that song. So you can affect. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, imagine that you have a premonition that there's going to be an earthquake or a plane crash. You don't go on it. You're not in that place. You're not, you left the village before the volcano goes off. And that information came from the future. Well, it affected the past.
Right. So
yeah. I'm slippery on time anyways. I think time is just kind of like a spectrum on possibility, in infinite possibility, time is kind of the meter between everything and where you're at and where you can go.
Yeah. I was just trying to see if I could tie those three masteries into past, present, and future. Because I was going to say maybe that the mastery of intent would be more forward looking because it would be something that we use. Our intention is created moment by moment, right? But then that wouldn't work because we can go back and intend in the past. So this is how my brains work. Brains. I have multiple.
No, it's amazing to think about, and it's powerful because think about that your emotion today and what you're doing today can affect you in the past. Because if you can perceive the future and how you're feeling and things you're experiencing and information, like it's going back. You can affect your past self. So if somehow, those deja vus, those premonitions, those things that just come to you from the ether, I have no proof, but, I'm completely open to the idea that your future self is connecting to your past self. And, you can feed yourself benefit. And,
Okay.
if the world kind of just molds around, you never know it happened because it's the experience you have.
Yeah, it's like a type of time travel. I was listening to another podcast recently, and I heard the somebody posit that whenever we're in like a tough spot, like between a rock and a hard place in our lives, or maybe we're like in a horrible accident, and like during the accident we have this little voice in our head that says, "Oh, everything's gonna work out, right? Everything's gonna be okay." Uh, it was posited that that little voice is us in the future recalling the event that we're now experiencing in the present, but it's in the future's past, right? So does that make, what do you guys think about that?
I haven't had a situation like that where I had heard everything's going to be okay. I often just say that. Maybe that's the same kind of thing. Because it's almost unconscious when I do.
Well, to me,
Um,
it's one of those moments where I don't think it's something talking to you. It's more of like, it is going to be okay. It's, it's what you mentioned before. And to jump to remote viewing real quick, one of the things that fascinates me about Joseph McGonigal is he recounts trying to remote view Jesus. But you can't really get feedback, so you never know how accurate it could ever be, and remote viewing isn't always accurate. But if you listen to the account of somebody, skilled in this, he talks about the fact that Jesus Christ, in essence, it was essentially a download from the universe, but that the overall idea that love was really a not to be fearful, that fear really is the one thing that creates a lot of the ills of humanity, a lot of the scarcity, a lot of the things that prevents us from doing things. Instead of just going forward and marching on and becoming the Star Trek civilization, we are caught in worrying about resources and fear of, just everything. I mean, that's all we live in. We live in an orchestrated system of fear, whether it's in the news or your job or caring for your family or healthcare, not paying your insurance, you can't get mobility. Like, it's so many crazy things out there. But if everyone could break, like, I was watching David Goggins today, and I was thinking, like, if we all had the mentality of David Goggins, we would be unstoppable. We would be that future society. We would be beyond anything to today. So forgot where I was going with that, but yeah.
well, it's interesting the way this whole conversation's led up. The deja vu's, like you say, um, I started experiencing not just deja vu, right? Like it was a poor way to put it. And I realized after reviewing some journal entries that they are these precog frame grabs, let's say, that I'll see in meditation. And then as I started realizing that more and practicing with it more, the deja vu was a longer experience, from that flash to, oh, I've not just seen this before, I've experienced this before, and that's about to happen, and it does. Um, and I do often work with future self energy, especially with tarot. But when those experiences started happening, where these scenes that I would see in meditation started presenting themselves in my physical reality, within 3 to 6 months, let's say, um, and realizing that was future self breaking into my current reality and giving me a sneak peek, um, I started intentionally putting things into my sketchbook that I wanted to see manifest in to the reality in much the same way. And it was that, like you said, Adam, it was that communication with that other version of self. And it's been a fun experiment to not just see in meditation, but then add to it through a sketchbook and communicate back.
No, I love that too. Because whenever I have a deja vu, I don't think like I think both directions. I think, is this an experience? Am I which end of the deja vu am I experiencing? Meaning if I have, I've had deja vus that I feel the deja vu, but I don't know what's attached to. And sometimes I feel the deja vu and I know what it's attached to. And I'm like, is this the future version or the past version that I'm experiencing?
Yes.
We're all time traveling. We're all chrononauts. Everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you've ever had precognition, and everybody has, because everybody is capable, then you have at least time traveled with your mind or information. Either way, it's amazing. Something science won't admit to, unless you're Dean Radin, coolest person on the planet.
Which we got to interview on 13 Questions, by the way. That was super cool. But that does bring us to the top of the second hour. I did not have a reading or an excerpt pulled out from the four agreements this time, so we're not going to end with the reading. But any last words from anybody else before we sign off? Derek, possibly?
No, I just had a great time. I appreciate everybody and all the input. I learned something every single podcast.
Awesome. And we this is super fun. Thank you everybody, Ben and Adam, Derek, and all the listeners for being here. We are doing this live on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. I will put this out as a podcast on Tuesday. So if you don't catch it live, you can look for the release on Tuesday evenings. And you can chat with us and interact with us during the show at krononautchronicles.com. And until next time, Chrononauts, carpe diem.